AI models can't do math. Ragging on RAG. Where the heck was Leroy Jethro Gibbs? And the usual collection of silly tweets, toots, and skeets. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome. My name is Ken Cousin. This is my free weekly newsletter, Tales from the Jar Side, where we talk about what's interesting in the tech world, in the Java space this week, and give you a little bit of why things happen instead of just what happened. Let's dive right in. The normal statement is that, welcome fellow jarheads to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of February 25th to March 3rd, 2024. Today is the 4th. So this is the normal day the newsletter comes out in video form. The text newsletter comes out every Sunday. This week I did teach a Spring and Spring Boot course on the O'Reilly Learning Platform, and I had my regular course at Trinity College in Hartford on large-scale and open source development. The normal recommendation here is regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads, at least until any real jarheads object, and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the button in the newsletter, or you can subscribe on the YouTube channel. That would be great too. So let's dive right into the first section. The first section is entitled AI Models and Simple Math. I mentioned that last week I published a video on the YouTube channel which was about the LangChain4j framework. That is a Java framework based on the LangChain framework for Python for coding to various AI models. And I've really been very pleased with the LangChain4j framework. I think they're doing a great job with it. And one of the interesting features of it is its so-called tool support. See, there are some things that AI models don't do well, and there are some things it does very well, like pattern matching. And the nice thing is through a framework like LangChain4j, you can supply functions to it that the AI model can then delegate to handle the things it doesn't do well. As an example, I mentioned in here is a trivial statement that is part of one of their tests in the LangChain4j examples project. It says, what is the square root of the sum of the number of letters in the words hello and world? Now, you might have to take a minute to think about that. Now, we'll break it down for you. It's really very straightforward when you think about it. You basically look, and here's the output from a model that works. Step one is you count the number of letters in the words hello and world, and each should have 5 letters. Then you add those two together, and you wind up with 10. And then you take the square root of 10, which is about 3.162. And the output I'm showing here is the output I got from one of the better LLMs. This one, the Mixtral model, which is based on Mistral and uses the so-called mixture of experts approach to the calculation. That's not really the important part. The important part is it got the right answer, and that's not going to happen very often with these AI models. See, now that's the difficulty. When they first came up with that example, tools like GPT 3.5 and so on really struggled with that question. Nowadays, however, GPT 3.5 Turbo and then the ones above that, GPT-4 and GPT-4 Turbo, have become really good at these sorts of problems, and they get the right answer all the time. Now, that's good because it got the right answer, but it's bad because it doesn't really motivate you to learn how to use the tools in LangChain4j. Now, by the way, the neat feature about this is that there's tool support in the basic API, I should say, in the programming model, the ability to pass in functions and have the AI identify which ones need to be called. But what the framework will do that you don't normally get is it'll do the invocation for you. And that's the neat part. I pointed out in my video that, ChatGPT and GPT 3.5 and 4, they get this problem right, even without the tools. But I also mentioned that most AI models do not get this right, but I didn't really demonstrate it, and I probably want to do that. So here I set up, I haven't shown it yet, but I'm going to show it in a minute. I set up a parameterized test in JUnit 5 that worked through the Ollama framework. Ollama framework is a way to invoke AI models locally on your local machine through an API. And I set up a way to do that checked 10 different AI models to see how they handled this. And here's a summary of some of the results. I'm not showing all of them because they're not consistent anyway. So the one called Orca Mini, which is relatively small, described all the needed steps, but decided not to invoke them. I don't know why. Llama 2 is the one that kind of triggered a lot of the big open source movement in AI models. That's from Meta or Facebook, however you want to say. Got it wrong because it thought the word world had 6 letters. And that turns out to be a common mistake in these AI models. I have no idea. So then it added 6 and 5 and somehow got 17. But it did compute the square root of 17 correctly. Not that that helped any, it was already wrong. There's a version called Code Llama, which is better at coding, and mostly the coding they're talking about is Python, but still. And that one, this time I ran it most recently, got the right answer. Yay, Now, PHI is a model from Microsoft, and it also got the right answer, but it couldn't leave well enough alone. The model gave me the right answer and then went off on this wild tangent and described some weird game where it had to evaluate the values of the letters of the words and sum their squares and do some square root of the result. And eventually came up with this statement: the final answer is about 12.4082 and 27.811 respectively. I'm like, what? And this all happened after it already had the right answer. It just couldn't stop itself. So, okay. Now, the smallest model I tested, and the small models are always highly entertaining, is called Tiny Llama. That's a really small model. And that came up with some bizarre calculation that went on and on. It used combinations of letters with both sums and products for some reason, and referred to something called a squaring formula with initial caps like that, whatever the heck that was. And then wound up with answers like 0 and, of course, -1. So apparently there's some imaginary numbers involved. And it concluded both of those were right. Yeah, okay. Now, Google recently released their open source model called Gemma. Gemini is their proprietary one, but Gemma is their open source one. The small one there is a 2 billion parameter model. And that one I ran through, and it said it thought both the words hello and world each had 6 letters, added them up to 12, and correctly determined the square root of 12. So, I mean, close, just not really the right answer. So then I did Gemma, the latest one, the regular version, and that takes about 7 billion parameters. And it, for some reason, had thought hello had only 3 letters. So it concluded the sum was 8, and then thought that the square root of 8 is 2. So, wow. I mean, the extra parameters didn't help that time. Mixtral's the one I showed above. That one got it right. But it was also a big model. I mean, that thing takes 26 gigs of disk space just to download and put together, and then you have to load it and everything. Now, I also have a direct connection to Mistral. I registered for the API and everything, and when I tried Mistral using Ollama, it also gave this little dialogue, and I thought, okay, this is weird. It said, tell me the steps. So it says to find the square root of the sum of the number of letters in the words hello and world, determine the number of letters, and you see here, the letters in the word world is 6. It got that wrong right away. Then it tried to add them together. It added them together and got 11, and then took the square root, and it's got that nice little square root sign in there and everything, and that is, in fact, pretty close to the square root of 11. So if it hadn't gotten the number of letters in the word world wrong, then it would have been okay. So I was running it at the command prompt just to see. Figured, okay, maybe I'll challenge it. How many letters are in the word hello? And it said, contains 5 letters. Good. How many letters are in the word world? The word world contains 6 letters. Huh. Why do you think the word world has 6 letters? I apologize for any confusion in my previous response. Yes, the word world indeed contains 6 letters. My initial response was correct, and it's not an error on my part. The word world consists of 6 distinct letters, W-O-R-L-D and E. So I said, where did the world, pun intended, wait a minute, I need my rim shot here. Yeah, did you get the idea there's an E in the word world? So I wrote, is there an E in the word world? And it says, no, the letter E does not appear in the word world. It contains only the letters W, R, L, and D. My apologies for any potential confusion earlier. So I said, given that, how many letters are in the word world? Oh, the word world contains 6 distinct letters, W, R, L, and D. At which point I figured, I don't know what to say. I mean, I just walked it through the process and it insisted that it's right, which, okay, fine. I mean, they always say you can ask an AI tool why it got the answers, and sometimes asking it to go step by step is very helpful, but you could see it makes up its reasons too. I mean, that's obviously not why it came up with that, because the logic is flawed right there. So, oh well. My real conclusion, though, is not really obvious from the demonstration here. The size of the model makes a huge difference. The small models come up with all kinds of random chaos. Sometimes they stumble on the right answer, but it's pretty chaotic. The medium-sized models do better, but you never know. It's still pretty dicey. The giant models, the ones that are, that like 26 gigs on the disk or bigger, those tend to get it right. They tend to be pretty good about that. I should mention that since this newsletter came out, Claude released its new Claude 3 version. And I tried this problem on their new Claude 3 versions, the Orca one, and that's the smaller one, I think. No, Sonnet is the smaller and Orca is the bigger one. I tried it on Sonnet and it got it right away. So I didn't even bother trying it on Orca. Those seem to be a significant improvement. So for what it's worth, when it comes to AI models, as I say, size matters. What can you do? Okay, this section is called Ragging on RAG, and I have to explain that. When you're learning about coding with AI tools, one of the terms that consistently comes up is RAG, or what they call Retrieval Augmented Generation. Kind of an awkward phrase, but what the concept is that you can give an AI model your own data and then have it use that data when answering questions. You can ask specifically about your data, or you could try to have it augment what it knows with your data. Now, it's not retraining, so it's still trained on its original data set, but the idea is to say, here's newer information or my own proprietary information. Let's ask questions about that. So given that information, the model's information always has a cutoff date, so it's always nice to be able to give it something newer. But again, there might be other parts here. And I mentioned, by the way, another possible title for this section, or for a talk I give, if I ever do give a talk on this, would be called Rag Quit, for Rage Quit. Wait a minute. There are several issues with RAG. I mean, it comes up a lot. And the first problem is, again, the model's not trained on your data. So how is it using it? I mean, it really isn't training data, so to speak. So the weights in the model are not being adjusted based on what you supplied. What you're giving it is what they call context. Now, context in an AI model is like RAM in a computer. It's like giving it memory. You're saying, here's global information I want you to remember when you do the following question. When I give you a question to answer, keep this in mind. So they call that context. And context I mentioned here is just a random example, would be something like, you're a helpful AI model, they always do that, that's really good at analyzing financial information. So here's a set of spreadsheets describing the performance of some company relative to its competitors over the past several years. Given that, answer the following questions backed by numbers contained in the data. So that's all context. Now, each AI model has a certain number of tokens in its context space, or context window, they call it. And to provide context information, they call that a system message. It's a message that is kind of, as I say, global. It's used for the model overall. Now, you could, in principle, pass that information in on every request, but then it uses up tokens on the input. Do you really want to do that? You'd rather just have it remember. But eventually you're going to exceed that context window, and it's going to forget things that it agreed on earlier. So what the real concept of RAG is to say, let's take your information or your documents and then figure out what parts of it are important so that those parts can be injected into the question as part of the context. That's what you're doing. You're supplying context. You're not retraining the model. So this is the idea. So with RAG, you can upload documents and ask questions about them, like Craig Walls, who wrote Spring in Action, has his own YouTube channel, has done several Spring AI examples where he uploaded a rule book, say for tabletop games, and he could ask, is this legal? What value here beats value there, or something like that. I think he uploaded the NFL rule book once just to ask questions about things too. And that makes a lot of sense. It's a good use case for that. So when you want to implement this yourself, then it gets weirdly complicated. You have to upload the documents, PDFs, spreadsheets, Word docs, whatever, JSON data, or just plain text. Then programmatically, you load what's called a splitter to divide up the information into distinct chunks called segments. Then the segments are embedded. The embedding idea is to create a numerical vector with double values in it that represent the information in some high order space, of parameter values. And this is going to be important because when the question is entered, it's also going to come up with an embedding. And then you're going to be looking for parts of the document that are similar to that vector, vectors that are close to each other. That's the idea. And it's a simple embedding algorithm, a simple similarity algorithm. When the segments are embedded, then they have to be saved somewhere. And this is normally to do that, you use what's called a vector database. There are databases that are really, really good at this sort of thing. And then once you've done the embedding, you can go ask for the parts of the document that are relevant to the question. That becomes the context for the overall question. So rather than uploading the whole doc, you're finding out which parts of it are the most relevant to the question you're asking and embedding that in. So that's the idea. Now, there's an article by Siva Labs, that's another YouTube channel, that actually describes the process in some detail. Now, it works, but you can see there's a lot to that. You've got algorithms to choose. You have to pick the right database. You have embedding models. You have to create the embeddings, the similarity scores, all that stuff. And this is one of the problems with RAG. And the problem is, if you look at any of the code examples, it's easy to get overwhelmed. They're way too complicated. And a casual observer is not going to have any idea what to do. So it really gets difficult. Now, the thing is, it's not difficult for developers. In fact, it's a dangerous level of difficult. By that, I mean the developers can figure it out. And then because the algorithm is repeatable over and over again, they kind of get seduced by it. Ooh, let me show everybody how this works. When everybody who's not a developer just has their eyes glaze over when they're hearing about this. I mean, they don't care. They don't want to do that. So instead, every developer who digs into AI wants to talk about RAG, wants to make a video about it, whatever, but the customers and the outsiders are just not even remotely interested. And whenever I run into somebody doing this demo, I like to show them this little picture here. Let's see if I can magnify that a little bit. And this is a picture from the custom GPT wizard inside of ChatGPT. It didn't magnify, but at any rate, you can see there, the knowledge says, under this knowledge section, it says, if you upload files under knowledge, conversations with your GPT may include file contents. Files can be downloaded when code interpreter is enabled. And what's really important here is there's also a little button that says upload files. In other words, if you're making a custom GPT, you don't have to figure out the answers to all these questions. You push a button, you select the files, you say okay, and then the algorithm does it for you. You don't have to do any of that stuff. So all that coding, what's the point? Now, the problem with custom GPTs from OpenAI is that they are restricted. Nobody can use them unless you are another OpenAI user, premium user, and can access the custom GPTs. Well, that's not great. So instead, if they want to make something available programmatically, they have something called an assistance API. So they call these AI assistants. And the big difference there is that with an AI assistant, you're coding something up, and therefore you could put it, you could call it with your own code. And that's what's usually sitting inside those little customer service apps, is one of these custom assistants with their own documentation. Like you go to a site and you want to return an item and it says, oh, check with the chat to find out what the return rules are. Or as Air Canada found out, you can have it make up rules for when you can get reimbursed for flights. And then the company's got to live with it. Yeah, so a whole different set of problems there. If you look at the OpenAI docs, however, you see this gets complicated. You have to create an assistant based on an existing model. You put in instructions and a choice of tools and Optional functions you can call too. Then each time you access it, you create a thread, one per user, which represents conversations. You add messages to the thread, and this could be multiple messages. Each time you get one back, you append it to the collection and keep running and check the run status to wait for it to return a value and see that it's okay. And you may loop over this. And again, it's not a trivial thing to do. Where does the RAG part come in? Well, again, there's a files API that allows you to programmatically add data to the system. But if you don't want to do any of this, to create your new assistant, you go to the Playground tab and you hit a button, and this is what the Playground looks like. I made a Managing Your Manager assistant where I loaded a PDF copy of my book in there. I picked a model, and then there's a little button down here with files next to it that says add, and I clicked add and I added the files, and there we go. I haven't used it for much yet, but I tried it out just to see if it would work, and there you go again. Mentioned another rejected potential title for the upcoming video / talk is assistance on the RAG, but that has other connotations which make it funny, but meaning I probably can't use it, so be it. Oh, I guess I need that warrant a rim shot. Let me know what you think. But wait, there's more. Recently, within the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, Google released the full Gemini model, even though it's only in a private beta. I can't get access to it yet. I'm so frustrated. Gemini 1.5. And what makes Gemini 1.5 really special, I mean, in addition to the power, is it has a context window of 1 million tokens. I mean, and they're supposedly testing a new version that's going to have 10 million tokens on it. And remember, why are we doing all this? What is RAG all about? Well, RAG is because you can't load your whole document or set of documents into the context window. But what happens when the context window is 10 million tokens? Holy mackerel. I mean, eventually you're going to be able to load the whole freaking Library of Congress into this thing, and there's no need to do RAG anymore. Right? Does the giant context window obviate the need for RAG? Not necessarily. I mean, the truth is there's never going to be a bad idea. It's never going to be a bad thing to split your information into easily digestible chunks and rank them for relevance and store them efficiently, in a system that's designed for quick similarity searches. I mean, that's all a good thing. So that's not bad. But still, you don't have to go to a huge amount of trouble when you're going to have tons of data, tons of room to talk. All you have to do is wait for it to be available. So for everybody who wants to do this now, yeah, they go through the code, they write the stuff, they demonstrate their own things. And yeah, it's doable. I mean, again, like Craig Wells couldn't stop himself, had to go put up rule books on this and say, see how cool this is. And I get it. So why would you do all this now? Well, one is that you want to add your own data now, Two is you're a consultant and want to charge a fortune for helping other companies do this. 3 is you're an AI YouTuber and want to demonstrate how easy this all is, at least for you. Aren't you so clever? I guess number 4 is if you're teaching a course on some of this stuff and you need to show everybody how to do it, and that's where I fit into all this. But sooner or later, I'll have a video on this. The question is whether it'll be a rant video like I just described, or whether I'll take it seriously and see where it might make sense and where it won't. But that's, wait and see. Subscribe to the channel and you'll see when that comes out. My friend Frank Greco, who works in AI a lot, posted this little tweet, and it was a cartoon, and it's really hard to read from here, but here it's a guy saying to the dog, speak, and the dog has got an LLM label on it. I can make that a little bigger. At any rate, then he's just standing there, and he says, speak again. He's just sitting there, and finally the dog's talking to his friend, and the friend says, what the heck, WTH? And the dog responds with, max tokens were set to 0. And there you go. There were no tokens left in the context space. And that's why you read Tales from the Jar side, so that you can enjoy geekier levels of jokes than you might otherwise have been able to. Okay, so much for the technical parts of the newsletter. This is silly. I normally wouldn't comment on something like this, but I was having a great deal of difficulty getting past it. And I thought if I talk about it, then who knows, maybe other people are having the same issue and maybe I'll finally be able to move on. So I titled this, Where Was Gibbs? And what happened was is my wife and I were catching up on the latest season of NCIS. I know. NCIS jumped the shark so long ago that these days it would have trouble making it over a flounder. I know. Most of the people that we liked have left long ago, including Gibbs, and so be it. Now, the new people are kind of good. They're okay. They finally calmed down Nick and made him into a decent character. I still find it highly entertaining that Gary Cole is the head of the group because you could just picture Bill Lumbergh running the group. Hey, McGee, what's happening? I'm going to need you to work this case on Saturday. Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm going to need you to work this case on Sunday, too. And we need to talk about your TPS reports. Did you get that memo? Again, the Office Space reference for almost anybody will probably get it here. I put in the picture from Google of Bill Lumbergh and the original horrible boss in Office Space. And here's, by the way, a picture of NCIS now. Look, he's gotten old like some of us have as well. Since they made Taurus's character much more interesting and much less of a jerk, that's really fine. And it's more of a fun show now. Now, I got to say, episode 2 was their big tribute to David McCallum, the character of Ducky. The actor passed away recently, and about 2/3 of that episode, they did a really good job. I mean, the slowed down intro was excellent. I liked a lot of it. The part that didn't work for me at all is that there was no cameo from Mark Harmon. There was no cameo from Gibbs. And Mark Harmon is listed as an executive producer on the show, so it's not like he's not around. It's not like he isn't doing something. I mean, he's there. They got to find a way to get him in there. And it didn't have to do much. And in fact, part of the plot of the episode involved a former Marine who was having difficulty manning up and testifying against a bad guy. And Gibbs would have been perfect to walk in and talk to him about that. But all right, if you're not going to do that, the least they could have done is have him show up at the funeral. And he didn't. There was no cameo. Now, they had a cameo from Donoso, spoiler alert, which was okay. I mean, that's fine. But Gibbs and Ducky were best friends for generations. I mean, forever. This was key. This was a fundamental part of the series. And the implication is he never made it back from Alaska to go to the funeral. No, I'm sorry. They wouldn't have had the funeral without Gibbs there. I just don't believe it. All they would have needed, as somebody mentioned in a comment, is a post-credit scene even of him walking up to the grave saying, "Goodbye, Duck," and then walking away. And that would have been enough. But no, we got nothing. And I did do a little research online to try to find out why they didn't. And they hemmed and hawed, made discussions about how expensive it would be to have an Avengers-style reunion to get everybody back there, and how they didn't want to just bring in Gibbs for one thing. If they bring him back, it has to be something special. And I'm like, no, Ducky's funeral is enough. He should have been there. I don't believe it. So I'm annoyed, but I'm over it now because I talked about it. Now, I got to say, we do follow NCIS Hawaii, and that was pretty good. And NCIS Sydney is okay. It's first season stuff. It's coming along. I don't watch the LA one or the New Orleans ones. I never really got into those. But do watch a lot of this stuff. And yeah, I mean, again, my wife and I, we're not young people. We're the target audience for this comfort food here. Okay, let's move on to the tweets and toots. Okay, first thing to mention is I do have a talk this week. I'm speaking at an IntelliJ IDEA conference, the conference for JetBrains. The IDE that I use is IntelliJ IDEA on a regular basis. I use it for pretty much all my courses and everything. And I'm giving a talk called Mastering Java Testing with JUnit, Mockito, and AssertJ in IntelliJ IDEA. My talk is, they listed as March 7th at 5 p.m. UTC. That's going to be like noon my time because we're on Eastern Standard Time. We moved to Daylight Savings next weekend. And they grabbed an old picture of me, and I don't have that much hair anymore, I'm afraid, but so be it. I like that. And you're welcome to come. There's a link in the newsletter, but it's just going to, just Google JetBrains and IntelliJ IDEA Conf, and it's free. You can go in there. And there's 2 days of talks, and the people that they've invited look to be really good. So feel free. Anyway, I'm having trouble putting the talk together, not because I haven't talked about JUnit, Mockito, and AssertJ. It's just that I have to find things that are directly relevant to IntelliJ to talk about. and some things are there and some things aren't, and I only have an hour, so we'll see. But also, of course, the biggest challenge is I've got to come up with new jokes for the talk, so I'm working on it. Okay, next one. Totally could have predicted that. Elon tweeted, of all things, put never went to therapy on my gravestone. And yeah, really? You're kidding, right? You know, Craig Calcaterra is one of the great baseball writers I follow, said 3 sessions with a good therapist would have saved you the $44 billion you spent in order to boost your self-esteem. My reaction is I don't think 3 sessions would have been enough. I think 3,000 maybe might have been a good start. I mean, this guy's issues have issues, but all right. I called this one guardrails. There was a little image here by the turnoff.us website. It says, "Hi, I'm your new sex robot." Really? Say something dirty. I can't. With the my new GPT model, we can at most go to the movies. In case you were not aware, Google got into a bit of controversy with their image generation tool inside of Gemini because the images it was generating were not what people were expecting. They were asking things like, give me some examples of Nazis or examples of Vikings or examples of popes. And they were getting extremely diverse examples that would make no sense whatsoever historically. Which really all that's pointing out is that the models they don't understand any of this stuff. They're pattern matching. So they wound up generating some images. The mistake here is anybody assuming that it knows what it's talking about and that what it's talking about has any real relationship to reality. It's just pattern matching. In fact, the ones who are objecting to it are under the assumption that by putting certain guardrails up, you could get it to produce what you want. And everybody who plays with these AI tools quickly discovers they are not as controllable as you think they are. It is not that easy. There's always a way to get it to do something you weren't expecting. Oh, well. So moving on. This one was called Our Glorious AI Future. The post on Mastodon said, what idiot called it Our Glorious AI Future instead of Nightmare on LLM Street? Okay. Now that's comedy. That was really good. I definitely have to find somewhere to use that. This one I titled Seasons of Leap. It said there are 527,040 minutes this year. Please adjust your productions of Rent accordingly. Now, if you don't get the reference, the musical Rent came out in 1996. So that's, oh my goodness, that's coming up on its 20-year anniversary in a couple of years. So that has a big song in it called Seasons of Love, which repeats multiple times in the song. There are 525,600 minutes in a year. And this year there's not, because of course it's a leap year. In fact, there are 527,040 minutes because we have one extra day, of course. Now, I've never actually seen the show Rent. I read Lindsay Ellis's review of it, which was not kind. And I've read a lot of other things about it. I don't think I'm not all that interested. It's a retelling of the opera La Boheme, but among, what looked to be, kids in the, I'm not even going to get into it, but it's La Boheme again. I have to admit that I first heard that song because I haven't been to the show on an album of cover songs from Broadway musicals by Donny Osmond. Donny Osmond's a contemporary of mine, basically. He was the one I wanted to be. Donny Osmond was the young member of the Osmonds who was the lead singer. They sang Puppy Love and all the other big hits they had. He was basically my generation's Justin Bieber, and he had a good voice. I mean, not brilliant, but he had a good voice. Of course, the other young singer of the same generation was some random person you may never have heard of named Michael Jackson. Yeah. Michael also had the ability to dance, too, which you might have noticed that. The only problem with Michael Jackson is he became somewhat problematic. You don't want to let your young son sleep over at his house. That's all I'm going to say about that. Let's move on. This one was a leap month, clearly posted by somebody who speaks Hebrew, who said, no offense to everyone very excited about Leap Day, but if you tried an entire leap month, go big or go home. And that's great. If you're not aware, not every calendar in the world, or not every locale, uses the Gregorian calendar. I mean, even though places like China, which have a separate lunar calendar, do use Gregorian calendar for most of their business operations, there are still calendars in the world that are lunar based. And in solar calendars, like the Gregorian calendar, they have to fill out 365.2422 days for the amount of time it takes the Earth to go around the sun. And that's 365 and just under a quarter. So if you keep adding a leap day every 4 years, you're off. It accumulates error. So the difference between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar is this higher order correction. If the year is divisible by 100, it's not a leap year, even though it's divisible by 4. But if it's divisible by 400, then it is. So 2000 was a leap year, but 2100 will not be, for example. And that's the higher order shift. But lunar calendars, like, for example, the one this guy is referring to, the Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar, have 12 months of exactly 30 days each. So the months are all predictable. They're all 30 days each. And that means they come up 5 1/4 roughly days short every year. So the way the periods work out, you pick 7 years out of a 19-year period and add an entire leap month. In the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar, there's a month called Adar, A-D-A-R, and then on leap years, they have Adar 2 is a 30-day second month that comes right after Adar. And if you were born in Adar 2, then on non-leap years, you celebrate your birthday in Adar. It's a nice, elegant solution. Although I don't know why you couldn't celebrate it in both, right? I mean, what the heck? But at any rate, it was fun to see a reference to that stuff. I always thought that reading about calendars is something I actually find entertaining. I'm just glad I've never had to write a calendar class. I mean, what a mess that would be. Okay, moving on. This one on printers, the Riker Googling Mastodon robot, it's basically a bot, puts in statements that Riker could possibly be Googling. And one was, why do printers still suck? And I'm like, oh yeah, I find it very easy to believe that even in the 23rd century, printers are a mess. You know, they've hard-coded into their business model such deep layers of evil that I don't even want to get started. Okay, moving on. Forgive and forget. So here's a picture of Ripley with a xenomorph looking all friendly, and it says, life is too short to be holding on to grudges. Okay, although the grudge there involves the horrible deaths of lots of your shipmates, so might be some issues, but you don't want it to feel too alienated, do you? Yeah, that's terrible. I apologize. So just to follow up that bad dad joke with another, the mostly harmless Mastodon feed posted, one day Bruce Wayne learned that his great-great-great-great-great-grandmother encountered a vigilante who called himself the Man of Bats. It was his Nana's Batman. So, any rate, this week is going to be kind of busy for me. I've got the first week of my spring 3 weeks course. I'm doing I'm doing a no fluff, just stuff virtual workshop on practical AI tools for Java developers. That ought to be fun. I've got that talk I mentioned. I forgot to mention, I also am doing a latest features in Java course on the APAC time zone. So Thursday evening, for me, it'll be like 8 to midnight, but it'll be daytime in the APAC time zones, presumably. And I've got my regular Trinity course all in there. So it's going to be busy. What happened today is, again, that Claude 3 model came out, so I've been updating for that. And it's been already an interesting week, and here we are, only Monday. So please consider subscribing, and I will see all of you next week and possibly in another technical video this week. Take care.
Hey there, it's time to tune in to Tales from the Jar, so let's begin. Java, coming in spring, oh my. Groovy Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the Jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech toast that never ends.